Senator Ludlam.
Thank you, Deputy. Pursuant to Standing Order 74.5, I ask the Attorney-General and the Minister representing the Minister for Justice, Senator Brandis, for an explanation as to why answers have not yet been provided to questions on notice number 2626, 2794 and 2795. These questions have been overdue now for quite a period of time. I understand my office was in contact with your adviser, Senator Brandis, forewarning you that I'll be raising this issue now.
Senator Brandis.
I'll investigate the matter, Senator.
Senator Ludlam.
See a little breakdown in communication, which actually feels identical to what happened yesterday. Mr Deputy, I move that the Senate take note of the Minister's response. I have a number of very troubling and very important questions that are now long overdue. A couple of them were raised in November, on the 20th of November. Some of them were raised in the middle of December. It is now early February, and we're into the first sitting week of the 2016 parliamentary year. And very, very serious allegations are raised in these questions, and I do not bring them up lightly. They are so serious, and I'll step through some of them in brief in a moment, that you would think that the Foreign Minister or the Minister for Justice or the Attorney-General, for that matter, would sought to have shut them down immediately if the allegations that are raised in these questions are not true. But instead of taking the opportunity to rebut these allegations and provide some evidence to back those rebuttals, I'm forced to raise this issue now because, in some instances, answers are several weeks overdue. Why is it taking so long? I want to go through a couple of instances of why I think this is incredibly important and why it appears there's a pattern here that the domestic politics of asylum seekers is warping our foreign policy and causing us, as the Australian government and the Australian people, to support violent human rights abuses in some of our neighbouring countries if it is seen to support the domestic ambition of vilifying people seeking asylum and seeking safe harbour here in Australia. Sri Lanka is one particularly chilling example. I put questions in now 2.5 months ago in mid-November relating to documents that were released under Freedom of Information to ABC's 7:30 program last August that revealed that the Australian government has been providing support to the Sri Lankan government's Criminal Investigation Department, known as the CID. And that equipment includes military equipment, white vans and other equipment, and the white vans are particularly resonant and synonymous, in fact, in Sri Lanka with enforced disappearances, torture and murder. And kidnapping, indeed. Mr Bruce Haig, the former Deputy High Commissioner to Sri Lanka, has said the following: "It has become part and parcel of the operations of CID in Colombo in Sri Lanka, and it's got a reputation worldwide for doing this sort of thing, the so-called white van syndrome, where they use white vans to pick people up off the street, and then relatives and family would never see these people again." Sonia Skeets, representing Freedom from Torture, put it the following way: "There are a number of torture methods associated with the CID, including beatings to many parts of the body, sexual torture including rape both of men and women, burning including with cigarettes and increasingly with hot metal implements, as well as asphyxiation and suspension methods of torture. Freedom of Torture can say categorically that torture has continued in Sri Lanka. It is perpetrated by the CID and by other arms of the state in Sri Lanka. It is deeply entrenched in the operating procedures of the CID." Now, the United Nations, the British government, human rights organisations here in Australia and around the world affirm the continuing nature of these human rights abuses in Sri Lanka, and they, in documented, exhaustive processes, have been set at the foot of this entity, the CID, that the Australian government is now accused of directly and materially supporting. That the Australian government would so directly support this unit when it is so clearly associated with these abuses and criminal acts is of enormous concern. And I would have thought, I don't think anybody in this chamber, and I would not imply these motives of a single individual in this chamber, would support in any way at all the kinds of horrors and abuses that are carried out by this unit. And yet the Australian government stands accused of supplying direct material support to this unit. So why has the government not sought to simply shut these allegations down and provide direct evidence that those allegations were wrong? We can only guess, because the minister at the table, who I acknowledge is here in a representative capacity, doesn't know, and the Australian government that could have shut this down the day after I lodged these questions has provided nothing. Questions 2794 and 2795 go to the Australian government's relationship with Detachment 88, a counter-terrorism unit within the Indonesian National Police. We see the same pattern here again. Reports out of Indonesia, and this particularly applies to West Papua, raise concerns about the role of Det 88, which is a counter-terrorism unit within the Indonesian National Police. This is a country on our doorstep. This building, where we are holding this debate this afternoon, is closer to West Papua than it is to my home city of Perth. It's right on our doorstep. And human rights groups have been reporting for years, in fact for as long as I've been following this issue in this place, that Det 88 personnel continue harassment, torture, abuse and extrajudicial killings of West Papuans, including children. Now, not only has the Australian government failed to outright, in black and white, condemn the activities of this unit, but what if we were in fact deliberately and systematically materially supporting them in that work? 29 September 2015, 2 high school students shot by operatives of Detachment 88 in Timika. 8 October 2015, West Papuan students, monks and a local journalist beaten and arrested while conducting a peaceful demonstration. Human Rights Watch puts it this way: new incidents of security force violence also continue to be reported. 2 allegedly drunken soldiers opened fire on a crowd in Koparapoka, Mimika Regency on August 27, killing 2 people and wounding 2 others. These are just a couple of very recent examples, but these go back as far as the documentary record goes. In December 2014, security forces allegedly shot and killed 5 peaceful protesters in the town of Enarutali, and a year later the government had still not released the results of official investigations into the shootings. Now, the Australian government is on the record of supporting Detachment 88 and other Indonesian military and paramilitary units. And I presume that the response will come back is that we find their role valuable in counter-terrorism work across the Indonesian archipelago. But what happens when these very same units are documented as perpetrating human rights abuses, extrajudicial killings, kidnappings and torture against pro-democracy campaigners in West Papua, right on Australia's doorstep? Can we simply wash our hands and look away when the evidence is so strong? I believe we cannot. The pattern is immensely disturbing. In the instance of Cambodia, it's my colleague Senator Hanson-Young, who's been fervently following these issues and supporting the cause of people seeking safe harbour, as is their right under international law here in Australia, travelled to Cambodia. The $55 million asylum seeker deal with Cambodia, ruled by an authoritarian government, that was formally returning refugees to their countries of origin, which is illegal at international law, despite their acknowledged refugee status. In recent years, the government has sent vulnerable people back to countries where they faced abuse, including China and Vietnam. One infamous example: in December 2009, Cambodia handed over 20 ethnic Uyghurs, whom the UNHCR regarded as persons of concern, to Chinese authorities, who then returned them to China. Now, rights groups, including Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, have documented how Hun Sen's regime crushes dissent in the country through extrajudicial killings, torture, arbitrary arrests, summary trials, censorship and widespread bans on assembly and association. Does Australia step up in the various international forums at which we have a seat at the table, or take our place, as we've done under previous governments, as an active middle power and condemn these human rights abuses? No. We write them out a cheque for $55 million in order to take asylum seekers that the Australian government has decided it can't accommodate. Perhaps most notoriously, on Nauru, Australia preemptively gave $6.6 million worth of aid to Nauru to develop its police force. New Zealand has withdrawn aid funding to Nauru's justice sector because of grave concerns about the abuses of the rule of law. And people, as again Senator Hanson-Young has documented extensively in this place, continue to be raped and abused. That is actually correct, Senator McDonald. For once I will take your interjection because it's quite correct. And as revealed in the Senate inquiry, a tiny fraction, 2 of over 50 matters reported to police since 2012, had resulted in a conviction. Human rights abuses rampant in that tiny country, not condemned by the Australian government but actively supported, aided and abetted. And the final example that I bring forward, in Papua New Guinea, Investigative journalist Rory Callanan revealed in 2013 Australia's Immigration Department funding of their most, as he puts it, and I quote, their most thuggish paramilitary police unit, allegedly responsible for rapes, murders and other human rights abuses, to secure the detention centre on Manus Island. The allegations here are utterly chilling. He revealed that officers of the mobile squad who beat a local man to death on the island in July 2013 then received a special living away allowance of about $100 a day out of funding provided by the department. Again, we see this pattern of behaviour that the foreign policy of the Australian government appears to be guided by. There is no regime too authoritarian that we will not hand over resources, equipment, whether it be military equipment or other forms of equipment, to enable them to carry out these human rights abuses. If it's all in service of the domestic political agenda around asylum seekers, I wonder what has happened to this country's soul. These are, I acknowledge, serious allegations. Not all of them are canvassed in the questions on notice that are on, I presume, that are on Senator Brandis's table now. But nonetheless, if this is not a pattern of behaviour, of foreign policy, conscious and premeditated foreign policy decisions by the Australian government, then let's see some evidence that that's the case. These questions should not have remained on the notice paper as long as they have. We would like to see some evidence that it is not, in fact, the foreign policy of this very government to support and perpetuate human rights abuses, no matter how dark the record of the military units or secret police units that we support. It is unforgivable if that's the case, and it is incumbent on the government to provide evidence to the contrary if such evidence even exists.